talking to Dan Pomerantz. He is the founder of Rebel Grown, which is a legacy brand from Humboldt. He's now in Vermont on a 200-acre farm, having operations there and expanding to other states. So let's begin with where did Rebel Grown come from and how did you get situated in the Emerald Triangle?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was always pretty into cannabis since I was young and kind of was on this, I guess, quest my whole life of how do you do this when it's illegal and stay out of trouble. And so a lot of it was kind of fantasizing when I was younger about what legalization could look like and why hasn't this happened already. And then I started, growing in the Northeast. I grew up in Massachusetts, the Boston area. And I moved to Vermont when I was 17, really to pursue a more rural lifestyle where I could get away with, growing and gaining some skills. And, I knew about the medical scene in California and Colorado. Maine also had some pretty decent laws at the time. And so the goal was to eventually go someplace where I could participate in a legal or at least a medical legal market. But I wanted to gain some experience before I went and did that because I wanted to be able to bring something to the table. So something that had a lot of thought into it for a long time. And then I eventually was able to move to California in 2010 after getting to visit and participate on a farm the year before.
Cool. So you've actually moved back to Vermont. So you were there for a little while and then headed to California afterwards?
Yeah, so when I first went out there, I bought my property here in 2012, but it was rented out as like an off-grid artist retreat and a recording studio for several years. And then when my partner and I, started, having kids and had a family, we wanted to eventually raise them, in the New England area where we were from, and kind of also evolving with the legal market developing on the East Coast. The plan was always to kind of have this old homestead in the hills of Humboldt where there's so much legacy and history in the neighborhood and the community and keep that alive, growing and producing our genetics for the brand for that market, and then be able to transition to doing the same thing on the East Coast. So it's been a bit of a back and forth. There's been years and times where I was kind of bi-coastal, spending 3 weeks, one place, 2 weeks in the other, and, burnt myself out for a while doing that. Now I travel around basically wherever I'm the most needed and, visit California 4 to 6 times a year.
Let's talk about the expansion. So let's look at the timeline of when you first got to California in 2010 to really, getting Rebel Grown into, I know you said like Kevin Jodry invited you into like some stores and retail locations and stuff like that. So how did that all come into be?
Yeah, well, I had some breeding projects going on and I was documenting it, some of the work I was doing online on the old internet forums on IC Mag. And, I heard that Kevin had the only dispensary really in the country that was permitted by an area, instead of, operating under the gray market medical laws. He actually had a permit from the city of Arcata, I believe, at Humboldt Patient Resource Center. So he was director of cultivation, and word was that he had a nursery where you could just go and check out the genetics and pick up new clones to try. And I went to introduce myself and mentioned that I had these breeding projects going on in southern Humboldt, and he kind of gave me my first shot, getting seeds into a medical dispensary and offering them to, medical patients. And so that's really, before I had a brand, I just had a name on the online forums that was Ganja D. And
Right.
when I started selling seeds online, on Seed Bay and Seed Boutique, and then, in California dispensaries, that's when I had to come up with a name. And, I went with Ganja Rebel Seeds, for several reasons. And so that was the original brand, Ganja Rebel Seeds. And in 2015, as California was getting ready to legalize for adult use, I decided to rebrand it, drop the Ganja out of it, even though I really love that word. And that's when it became Rebel Grown.
So you were a seed producer before you were selling flower to the public.
Yeah, well, I always sold flower. I always sold
Okay.
weed to people. But what was cool is, you know, once I made it to Humboldt, I had a lot more space to grow. Before that, my grow rooms were really small. They were really limited in terms of space and what I could test out. And it was only in a few years before moving to California that I started actually growing different seeds and selecting individual plants for production. It was harder to get genetics back then, so I was just lucky to be able to get access to a clone from someone. I didn't always get to choose. And sorry, I got sidetracked a little bit there, but So finally, when I was in California, I had the ability to, choose to grow more things and see more varieties and start to experience a lot more. And so I would always grow a crop every year outdoor in California. And, of course, in Vermont, these small batches, they were always getting sold, but I wasn't getting the feedback from the people smoking it because that's the way the chain works. The grower sells it to someone who sells it to someone who sells it to someone. And eventually, the end consumer gets it. And so what was cool about offering people seeds is instead of me wholesaling a crop and never getting the feedback, I'm selling directly to the home growers or directly to other commercial cultivators. So then I'm really building relationships with the people who grow the genetics, and I'm getting all this feedback from them. I'm getting samples of the flower, I'm getting photos and descriptions. And I just think it's such a cool connection, hooking people up with genetics and staying in contact. And it's kind of like an R&D collaboration. You get to learn so much more about your own genetics beyond what you're able to test or see how people do it in different environments. And that connection was always lacking for all the weed that I was growing. And that's really how I decided to do a flower brand. The idea back in 2011 was, what if these seeds that I'm selling, I go to the dispensary and people go, well, what does it grow? Well, I would love to be able to grow it for the dispensary, and then the dispensary could have a jar of the weed, maybe some bubble hash for people to try, and the seeds, so they could see all the spectrums of it. And that's kind of how I got into having a brand in the first place.
Right on. And it's so culturally entrenched. So you mentioned, so Ganjadi, you were also a writer, right? Like you were working with Skunk Magazine and you were doing some articles and that kind of thing under that pseudonym?
Yep, I still write with Skunk. So
Nice.
I just loved, all the cannabis magazines back in the day. And I always kind of dreamed of being a cannabis journalist. I used to email High Times when I was old enough to have an email, never heard back from them. So over the years, I got connected with Skunk Magazine, got to contribute some articles. Now I work closely with them. I'm actually a senior editor there.
Right on.
Julie, who runs the magazine, still, it's pretty amazing that the content that gets put out in terms of modern cannabis that's very rootsy about some amazing operators within the culture.
Yep.
And have written for Grow Magazine in the past, which I'd love to continue doing at some point. Also a great media publication.
Yeah, right on. You mentioned High Times. Just as an aside, so what's his name again? He bought it, so it's coming back. Is it coming back to print?
I don't know. It's an interesting thing. The magazine is what got a lot of people into weed.
Yeah.
When I was probably 13 years old, I was at a friend's house whose mom had a High Times, and I'm looking at like an old High Times, and it was the first. There was really no media about cannabis other than a few types of books, and yeah, there you go.
That's my mom's T-shirt from like '75.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So that's super early. So I've always wanted to be a High Times historian because it was so fascinating. The story is this dude was smuggling a bunch of weed into the country and needed to be able to market it and let people know. And so originally it was just photos and descriptions of the weed they were importing, trying to sell it in New York City. And
I didn't know that.
The money that this guy was making, was used to found Normal. And so Keith Stroop and him were friends, and a lot of the money that High Times was bringing in from the weed they were selling ended up, funding Normal, which, is so instrumental in all cannabis regulations and the evolution of all legalization. So it's just, I always wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes with the breeders in Amsterdam and the weed stuff going on with the magazine. So that's kind of how I got into the whole thing.
And then you're also a musician, so how does that tie into your brand and cannabis in general?
Sure. Yeah, so the music side, when I was younger, I was trying to be a musician, and the hip hop scene in Boston where I grew up was pretty, volatile, edgy scene. And I just chose to stick with weed, that I had a better chance at succeeding in life rather than pursuing the music. And so while I eventually was able to build a career, which is, I guess you could say, still surviving, in the weed industry, I didn't pursue the music, but I continued working on it. And during COVID, I got real serious about it, and I was like, man, we're all stuck at home. I really got to use this time to do something productive and something, special and meaningful. And so I worked at, 2-3 nights a week, just organizing my catalog and writing. And, now I have some pretty cool music to share. Some really amazing producers that I'm honored and blessed to work with. And I have some stuff out on a Bandcamp, and the hope is that as I have more time and energy and resources to put into it, I'll start releasing more music regularly, actually having blogs about the song, what it means, music videos, and really, sharing, what I put together with people.
Very nice. Yeah, and so you were in Toronto in May for Grow Up. That was your first time in Canada, and you were there with someone else from the industry, but you were doing some recording up there as well. You were like in a studio.
Yeah. My friend Christian arranged for a studio, space for us.
He's is he, Gavita? Is he with Gavita or is he?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's the rep for Canada for Gavita
Right.
and General Hydroponics.
Right.
And we met at MJ BizCon, really just bonding over the love of good weed. Because I had my double OG sour with me, and then I had this very perfectly cured batch that really is more like almost a old school sour than the OG. But anyway, we just kind of hit it off and bonded on music and beats, and yeah, it was a very very cool trip for me.
Yeah. Had you when you mentioned your weed? So Av Singh, I think, was he the moderator of the panel that you did?
The Sungrown panel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was. Had you met him prior? Because after the fact, he said that he smoked your weed and it was like phenomenal.
Yeah, I can't remember or recall if we had met. I think he may
Yeah.
have been at a conference that I was at as
Yeah.
well, and maybe someone else shared, or maybe he had traveled to California at some point and found it in a dispensary. So I forget exactly what the connection, was,
You're on
but
his radar, and he's just such a legend. He's so big in Canada and I think probably globally, but he's really big in the organic scene and just sounding and he was talked about. One of the things that you mentioned in that panel was about just like the medicine of organic sun grown and how it's just different than something with synthetics or indoors, and you're putting all this. He's just talking about the spiritual aspects of it. So I want to talk about that too. So were you always growing out? I guess in California, you were always growing outdoors.
yeah, especially in California. Yeah, so Humboldt, tell me, where to start, about organics and
So you
outdoor.
said you moved to California in 2010. When did it become when did the rec market start? When did it become legal?
Sure. So the rec market passed in California in, I want to say, November of 25, and then went into effect in 20, not 25, 15.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
2015, and then 2016 is when the law was passed. The official regulations there was like a slow transition from the medical into the Prop 64. And then all that stuff went into official like 2018 of March, I think. And so I got there in August of 2009, came back to the East Coast, went back for the fall, and then moved out shortly after. So I showed up, I guess, right before things got kind of out of control in what you might call like the green rush era, where
Yeah.
everybody was just like kind of going for it. There's more like opportunism and greed than there was kind of like community and
Yeah.
culture. It was an exciting time, but I got to experience a few years before things really ramped up like that, when it was, the neighborhood that I was in, the scenes were relatively small except for some of the bigger growers. And there weren't a lot of outsiders. Trim scenes used to be very small groups of people, like 3 to 6 trimmers, usually family and friends.
Nice.
Then all of a sudden, next thing you know, there's like 15 trimmers on a scene, then 25, then next thing you know, there's giant scenes, 50 and 75 trimmers. And
Tourism, like
yes,
trim tourism. Yeah.
it used to be these really small, secretive communities, and I got to experience a few years of that magic before it just became normal and too many people came.
Yeah. I was in BC at the time on Vancouver Island, and people were like, "Oh, we're going to Humboldt. We're going to trim." Everyone was. It was like this big migratory thing. I think the only time I went down there was 2018. I went down for NCIA San Jose.
Yeah,
Yeah, I drove the Oregon coast, and that was actually a huge for how I got to where I am now. But it was just so much fun. It was a really really fun time. I guess that was a little bit after 2016. But yeah, I want to talk about growing. So your practices and
sure.
why. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've just always believed that organic herb as medicine is just more natural, more pure. Over the years, I think I'm really sensitive with my palate to, really believe that that's true. The first experience I had with organic farming, I guess there's two things. One is my grandfather, growing up, had beautiful gardens all throughout his, front and backyard. He was, known by the mayor for his gardens, and grew everything from beautiful flowers and orchids that he'd put in competitions to vegetables.
And that was in Boston or in the area?
Yeah, that was in Boston, just west of the city. And, he'd been at that property since 1957, I think,
Cool.
which is when he first started his compost pile.
Wow.
After he passed away, we had a summer before the house got sold, and I took some of the compost from that pile and grew directly in it. And it was some of the healthiest, most vibrant plants. But around that same time, when I was 15, from High Times, I heard about a book called Primo Plants by Mountain Girl. And
Okay.
very, very basic instructions on organic outdoor farming. That was the first cultivation book that I ever read. It was the first one I read that just kind of, instead of saying you could do this or here's how the science works, it just said here's an idea that I like. And it really just focused on composting and worm castings, compost teas, natural, ingredients. And so
Yeah.
um, I've always just stuck with that style of keeping things really simple and organic. But as I have learned more and gained a lot of experience and scaled and built out, farms over the years, I just still think that a diversity of organic inputs grows the best weed, the most balanced soil. I could go on and on about, different theories. And at the same time, like I was saying earlier, while it's my style, I think everything is really about the skill of the operators. So people can
Yep.
grow with synthetics or the mix of synthetic, organics, and organic. Good growers with good genetics and dialed environments, know what they're doing. But my preference is organic.
What's your tea recipe? Can you share?
Yeah, I can share the tea recipe. So the two main bases of the tea are basically the highest quality compost and worm castings that you can find. On the West Coast, we really like this product called Baseline by Vital, which is this guy Brian, amazing supplier of organic supplies for farmers for I think probably decades now. And the Baseline is basically, I think, just a composted peat with some humus and other things in it. So that's usually the base of it. Compost worm castings, Baseline in California, and then as a base, I use a brown oat flour. And I use some gypsum, different trace minerals and micronutrients. What we used to use was a combination of azomite, glacial rock dust, these trace minerals that you'd get from Spare Time Supply in Willits in California and Mendocino County. Now, understanding soil science a little bit more, it's a little overkill with the diversity of the minerals and the timing those things break down. A little bit of kelp meal, some fish hydrosolate, or some type of something from the ocean that we add the last 24 hours. And then usually in California, where it's really hot, without using a microscope and understanding what's really happening with the biology in the tea, I usually try to apply it within, 18 to 24 hours. That way I'm not risking things kind of spoiling, going anaerobic. It can get really, really hot there. So even if you have a tea brewing in the shade, it could still be 95, 105 degrees in the summer. So I like to, brew the tea and use it quick.
Yeah. What's the optimal temp for that?
Like I said, I have a lot of things that I know a little bit about without being an expert in too many, but generally I think anything over 85 degrees is
Gotcha.
probably going to promote harmful, bacteria. We also put a lot of microbes in the teas already. So it's like you take these teas and you're trying to brew these species of all this microbiology from what's already present in the worm castings and the compost. And then we also add different species of Bacillus subtilis and Thurbtilis and Trichoderma and kind of add that, hoping that they all start reproducing in there quickly.
How do you get those? Where do they come from?
In California, we have this guy that's kind of like a local mad scientist guy out of Fortuna where we get this product from. And then here in Vermont, my head grower has a source, which is a guy who has kind of a pool supply company, and on the side keeps these microbes, and they're all, certified organic. I mean, they're just, living microorganisms. But we use them at a really great diversity and high colonization rates. And I think that's what makes it so beneficial, as opposed to buying them, overpriced from a lot of the companies that offer the same things.
Right on. Okay, so you moved to Vermont or you bought the property in 2012. What was the farm prior to moving there? Like, how did you get it all into cultivation?
Yeah, so I was living in Humboldt at some of these amazing properties in the hills, pretty unique spots. But I was always kind of homesick from the East Coast because I grew up in Massachusetts, and so I always kind of talk about, we're in the top of the mountains in Palo Verde Island Mountain area of southern Humboldt, southeast Humboldt County, and there's no light pollution whatsoever. So you see some crazy stuff in the sky, and it's beautiful. But the vibe that I got was now I'm looking from the west, looking east, and I never felt that way before. I'm used to being in the east, here, looking to the west, and so I really desired to have a place to go on the East Coast, to call my own, figure out how to make it happen. So I would check the real estate listings, and I found this place that was 126 and a half acres with a straw bale off-grid house and a pond, beautiful pond. And at the time, I was going through a legal, a criminal case, which was real bad. And, I got in trouble, and I got pulled off a train in Nevada, and they were threatening me with 2 to 5 years in, the state of Nevada's penitentiary system, which is not good. And so while all that was going on, I was had this huge collective in California, big responsibility, big farm, a lot of weed. And also, all my breeding projects and my seed company. I had a soil company at the time as well, making customized soils and bulk mixes for people in Northern California. So I had a lot going on with this criminal case, and somehow I was able to get this property and close on it. It's just a miracle, the way that it went down, because, I had this criminal case, and so I didn't want to talk about any business, legal or illegal business. So I got a prepaid phone to talk to the owner, and I was running this scene, and I got the guy to agree to meet me and show me the property, and my partner, whose farm I was running at the time, I leased out his property, had my collective there, but it was a big project, and I was like, hey man, I'm leaving for 3 days, to go meet this guy, and I took off in the summer. I showed up, and the guy was showing other people the property, So anyway, it's a long story, but somehow I ended up with it and haven't lost it.
Did he choose you?
I chose him. He gave my girlfriend and I a tour, and we went for a walk down, the old logging road through the middle of the property. And at the time it was just, overgrown.
Yep.
And showing us, bear droppings and checking out all the wildlife. And
Nice.
I told him, I was like, hey man, I flew here from across the country to make a deal with you, and you're here showing the place to other people, you gotta figure something out. And so we were able to figure something out. And it was tough. I had to convince the guy to owner finance, because at the time I didn't have any credit, I was pretty new to even having a bank account. I operated in cash.
Yep.
So I was able to convince this guy, but nope, never missed a mortgage payment, paid it off.
Yeah. Okay, so that was 2012, and then when were you selling products to the Vermont market?
So Vermont, they first went forward with a hemp bill. When the U.S. passed our farm bill, Vermont kind of went hemp crazy. And I was living in California, but I saw an opportunity to start to learn about developing soil, growing in the ground, row cropping, and just understand a different aspect of agriculture. And so I got a hemp license when I lived in California. And for a couple years, we planted hemp here, started developing the soil, and starting to develop farming systems, knowing that one day it would be future legal here. So I used to stand out here 13 years ago, and dream about, man, if I could build some weed gardens here like I do in Humboldt County, that would just be this amazing dream. And so Vermont went legal. Adult use stores opened October 2022. So I got my license here July of that year. So this is our 22, 3, 4. This is our 4th year of cultivation legally here.
So before that, you were building the soil, and did you say that you did get a hemp license? So you were trialing kind of with hemp plants? Cool.
Yep. So, the whole, hemp thing is, a lot of people here thought that there's going to be this CBD market and they're all going to get rich growing hemp.
Right.
I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I also knew the license, it was like $35. I had access to plenty of hemp seed. I had a tractor, some farming equipment, and so it was really more about trial and error. And, we sold some hemp, had some success, had some failures, but it was an invaluable couple years of R&D getting ready for the legal weed to just really start to understand and make decisions on how we wanted to farm here.
Sweet. What else are they doing with hemp down there? Like, is it textiles? Like, are they selling it for that kind of thing, or is it like food?
Vermont's a really small state, so even though it
Yeah.
is an agricultural state, a lot of the agriculture is like dairy,
Right.
and cheese. So it's like people here, every restaurant had like CBD infused drinks, and every store had a
Of
million
course.
CBD products. People, weren't necessarily using it to make linens and,
Yeah.
other things. It was mostly just the cannabinoid
Yeah.
market.
Makes
And
sense.
I think at one point, Vermont's a pretty small state, and there was like 1,400 hemp farmers. Um, and so, a lot of people bet the family farm on it, took out mortgages, and thought they were going to really,
Yeah.
be successful in the long term. And there's just not that many people that want to be smoking CBD flower all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know it's tough. Like same with when Canada went legal, same story with just like the glut of, you know, retail and producers and everything, and it's a little bit. I think it's starting to straighten out now, hopefully. But anyway, so then you've also expanded operations into Arizona and Ohio, and are you planning other states?
Yeah, I mean, so the goal is I've always wanted to share my herb with as many people as I can. With the seeds, we want people to grow our seeds. It's like rewarding, and it's also how I support myself. And with the brand, it's the same way. When I came out with Rebel Grown, there weren't a lot of people with brands in California at the time, and a lot of them were really just about having a name or package to put the product in. But to me, it was much more than that. To me, it was like kind of a chance to tell my whole story of how I got from like so far away with nothing to like such a unique opportunity, being in the room or being present to experience so many cool things that I think are, historical and unique and special, and then contributing to it and finding all these other ways that we contribute. So the brand
Hmm.
is really important to me. I think it's got a beautiful look. Let me see if I have it. Like I just I love the way it looks, and the idea wasn't like how can
Yeah.
I sell something to people? It was like if I had a uniform, what kind of clothes would I wear every day? If I
Yeah.
went to a store, what kind of things would I buy? If
Actually,
I
I saw your logo this morning in the magazine because we're sending the new edition to print, and it's on the Alpine ad. So there's a little Rebel Grown logo on there going to print
Sure.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Mhm.
it's special to me. There's a lot of significance and a lot of story. But yes, the other thing is there's a lot of brands who are competing and they're saying, "Man, I gotta get people my product and my message and grow this business." For me, the motivation is to grow the brand to get my message and my weed to people. The
Mhm.
business side of things really comes second to me in terms of the intention. But the other thing is the effort that's gone into the genetics, I think, is a little, unique, and it's a lot of the energy that I've, put into things. And so
Tell
most
me
of
more.
yeah, so most of what we offer through the brand are genetics that I've developed over the last 10 to 15 years. And I really tried to focus, from early on finding what I think some of my favorite things are, or favorite styles or flavors, but from testing everything I can get from anywhere, and then working those and really getting to understand them. And so it's just turned into a journey for me of testing and experiencing and growing and making seeds of all these different genetics. And the whole goal was, if I really do this right, it's fun for me, and I get to smoke weed that I really enjoy,
Mhm.
like this.
What is
Um,
that?
this is Golden Grams, which is, a really special variety that I have a long history. It's got a really cool story. And this is a similar phenotype to something that was a seed plant that I grew in 2011 that I've been working for
Yeah.
numerous years to try to find this specific flavor profile, a specific way that it makes you feel. Um,
And
and
what is it? What's the flavor profile?
it's unique. So it's a polyhybrid with all these different things from blueberry F13 traits to C99 to the OG Kushes and sour. It's all kind of blended in there.
Nice.
But this direction of it has a lot of the cushy and the OG, gassy background, but it has a flavor that I call a twang,
Mm.
which is like a mix of like rotten fruit. It's unique and it's deep, and the smoke and the stone is really powerful and unique. What I think it does to people spiritually and creatively. But there were years where I had made, the wrong choices with males or breeding selections, where I had made it harder to find these types of phenotypes. And so I've taken years recently to bring it back and go into older seed stock and find the right ones and refine it correctly. And so with all that work, your question was about the brand partners, in these other markets, but the goal is to find people who really believe in me, that if they grow my genetics and then present it, in my branding and offer it to their customers and let me kind of show up to promote it and explain what it is, that hopefully it'll be a success for them and people are going to want to support it, want to try more of it. And so, we hope to keep our R&D and testing of new genetics going, where I can keep giving partners the new next best thing that I'm finding all year round, always build evolving menus, things that check every box for a cultivator and someone selling it, but most importantly for the person smoking it. And so, so it's taken, 9-10 years of me working towards those goals of having partners that would believe in that with me. And so, so we've launched the brand in Arizona with amazing partners there. The flower shop, super amazing cultivators. My buddy Patrick, who kind of put it together, is a friend of mine that I've done breeding and collaborative work with in California. And the way that we put this together was they grew out my stuff and said, your stuff is the highest COAs of anything that we've produced here.
Oh, right on.
Our other brand that we have has been choosing your genetics. And I gave them one of my award-winning cuts, and we did like a kind of small limited release that had really good reviews and sold out very quickly. And so we're currently in their 3 stores on their deli menu. And then the goal is to finalize our, packaging specific to that state. And then we have a whole bunch of my genetics in production there. And the goal is to bring it to other dispensary chains and statewide starting in the fall.
Cool. And what about Ohio?
Ohio, same deal, like natural organic relationship. The president of the company and I were introduced through a very respected person, in the cannabis industry. And they were looking for genetics, and I kind of explained, I've got some momentum, but if you look into what I have going on, this would be a really dope look to provide to people. And so after getting to know each other for a while, in Ohio, awesome operators, like I was saying, Living Soil Organic Beds. They have 7 of my clones in production, and same deal. We're trying to bring, the highest quality weed that we can to people of my genetics. And it's going to be fun for me to get to travel to these places several times a year, get to meet all the people working at the stores, the customers, the grow team, get to smoke the weed with everybody.
Yeah. And what about Canada? I mean, you said something about maybe looking for partners there, or like some, I think because you can bring seeds to Canada, right?
I have to look into exactly what the appropriate way to do things are.
Yeah.
But I had some awesome conversations. I mean, the experience that I had visiting Toronto was just great, because the vibe of the whole city and the community of the weed people that I met was just super friendly and welcoming, and I had a great time. And I also got to see a lot of awesome herb, meet a bunch of growers, and kind of, see at least photos of what their grows look like and what type of genetics people are rocking with. So I definitely have some conversations going on that could potentially open up the opportunity to bring stuff to Canada and also into some export market with some partners. So
that's excellent.
Yep, a little too early to get into, but hopefully we'll be able to find the right people to collaborate with.
Yeah, the Toronto show was really good. You should definitely try and get to the Vancouver one. I think it's going to be in the new year. It's in January, but it's back in BC, and I think it's going to be really big because it's been years since we've had one out there. So definitely one to keep on your radar.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. I mean, I'm aware of the culture from back in the day in the 90s of Vancouver Islands and BC. And I've always wanted to visit, have a bunch of friends there, and people were telling me I should come back for it. So would love if I have an opportunity to.
It's stunning. I haven't been in a while, but I gotta get back. Yeah, it's great. Okay, cool. So what other, you kind of talked about visions for the future in different markets, but what else what's your day-to-day filled with? You got kids, you're busy on the farm. How do you balance it all?
Sure, it's a hard balance right now.
Yeah.
I've got somebody knocking on my door, but it's so realistically, currently the Vermont farm holds all of this down. So I do a lot of did I just freeze up there for a second? Hold on. Hey, Billy. Hold on. I'll be right back. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's perfect timing. It's the farm life.
Yeah, no, all good. But yeah, so I mean, to balance it, I mean, right now Vermont essentially supports all these things that I'm working on. The Vermont market here being kind of newer, the prices started high. They've obviously come down as people have, grown too much weed once again, like every other market. But it's allowed me to support, the operation and the staff here, have a little bit of resources to, do my business development and kind of push forward with these partnerships. A lot of our resources go into our breeding program, so it's a little unusual. I wouldn't call it like the wisest business decisions in terms of living in the present, but we put a lot of resources into our breeding here. The state of Vermont actually came up with a new license type called a propagator's license, and it allows me to have up to 3,500 square feet for R&D or seed production. And what's unique about the way they wrote this law, so, the Vermont legislators, passed this into law, which allowed the Vermont Cannabis Control Board to create this license type. So it's interesting that it's backed by the state legislators and it's legal, but it basically says that I can grow cannabis plants that produce seeds. And those seeds, if they are compliant with USDA laws in terms of, hemp, then I have permission to sell them direct to consumer. And so it's unique. There's actually, I believe, I think there may be some other people in Vermont that have applied to it. I don't know if they've gotten it yet, but so I may be the only person in the U.S. that has this, where I have my state's government basically saying you can grow cannabis plants if they produce seeds and those seeds can be legal as hemp, then you're allowed to sell them direct to consumer anywhere you can sell federally compliant hemp. And so part of getting the license was filling out, a sales proposal, how I'm going to sell this stuff. And I was able to say online on my website, different distributors' websites, direct to consumer, farmers markets, really anything that I want other than cultivation areas on my legal cannabis farm, and they've approved it. And then on top of that, I have several partnerships with different hemp companies in the U.S. anyway. And so we put a lot of effort into breeding these seed lines because I believe it's a big part of the value of my brand and my future.
Yep.
It's one thing to be like, oh, I've got a cool label and a story in weeds, so let me grow any strain and put it in my stuff and offer it to people. But I think being a brand that's also a genetics company is really cool, where we can say, well, here's the meaning behind what's in the jar and tell the story of developing it over more than a decade and why, after all that time, we think it's still relevant or worth smoking in modern times, or will have kind of like timeless characteristics that people will still want it in the future. There's a lot of work that goes into the genetics development. Realistically, a lot of that is, my team here busts their ass.
How big's your team?
So we've got I've got a farm director, kind of operations manager who's full-time, lives on site. We have another full-time farmer. I've got a full-time property manager, maintenance, machine operator. That's who just showed up, to fix my dryer duct here. And then I've got a full-time finance/compliance administrative manager. And then we have probably another 4 or 5 part-time people processing, making pre-rolls, packing weed, trimming, helping out part-time on the farm. And so for a tiny little community here in Craftsbury, we're one of the larger employers in the town. And when times get tough, and sales slow down certain times a year seasonally here with lack of tourism or just, whatever, I work for this crew to keep them going. But what's interesting is they're not just operating a farm that, grows weed and produces weed and sells it. Our breeding and R&D is like super comprehensive and requires a lot of effort in growing tons and tons of plants that might never get flowered, or transplanting tons and tons of plants, that never get sold for money. And so, the breeding area is right above the house up here, and pretty cool, 3,500 square feet of 10 by 10 and 10 by 20 foot hoops that are each an isolated, breeding pollination area for all kind of open pollinations.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that community piece. That's are you hearing this little like snake sound?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's the fan on my computer.
Oh,
There's
that's
some,
okay. No, it's gone down now.
it
All
is. I
good.
just
I think
adjusted the screen there. And
sweet. Okay. Yeah, I love that community. What's the name of it? You said Craftsbury?
Craftsbury, yeah, it's
Okay.
a real small town in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. I'm probably about 40 miles from the Quebec border here.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever go to Montreal?
We are actually going up to Montreal for my daughter's birthday next
Oh,
month.
that's so fun.
Yeah, there's a music festival that we've got tickets to, so we're going up with a couple of her friends and their parents, and going to be up there for a couple days.
That's fun. There's lots of cannabis culture there. There's a ton of really amazing growers right in the city, and yeah, it's just it's a really cool place to hang out. Is it smoky there right now? I know it's kind of drifting down to Ontario.
Um, you know what? The sky. I mean, we have like an overcast day here,
Yeah.
but some blue sky. I'm not seeing any smoke. I
Okay,
don't think.
that's good. That's good. Hopefully it doesn't go down there. But yeah, do you have any like animals on the farm? Are you growing any of your own food or anything like that?
Sure. So, every year is a little bit different. So, the whole goal is to develop this whole place into a permaculture inspired, farm, place to visit, ecotourism destination, where people could come stay in an off-grid cabin, you know, mountain biking, hiking, horseback riding, ponds to swim in, and jump off spot for a Vermont vacation. There's beautiful lakes and all types of cool stuff to do around here. Super rural, but the whole focal point being cannabis and the breeding. So,
Yeah.
there's been years where we've grown a lot of veggies. There's been years where we haven't. The cannabis usually gets all the attention and all the resources.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, this year, one of the fields below my house, we put less cannabis plants in there. And, we have some other random extra veggie starts and things like that popped up there. I have my small kind of like home personal garden and stuff. But the hope is, we have certain areas picked out where we want to have an orchard and, different types of lowland berries here, highland berries there. I have a big open field up top, and so I share that with my neighbor. He's got, cattle and horses up there, but we'd like to, kind of develop and evolve into more other types of traditional farming.
Yeah, right on. I was going to ask about like any of the inputs for the cannabis, whether it's manure or compost or anything like that from other farming inputs.
Sure, yeah. So that's part of the regenerative farming is trying
Yeah.
to close loops and produce things on your own. So we make our own compost here that we've now been doing for 2 years. We actually have an intern from a local college here. That's one of his focuses. We're
Very cool.
using our own compost right now in our whole breeding program up top. So that's something I hope to document quite a bit this year to kind of show our process. But we take all of our recycled, all our root balls, all types of yard waste and just green waste from around the farm. Even when we're cleaning up gardens, just like anything that can be recycled into compost is. And then we also know someone that has an alpaca farm, so we have truckloads of alpaca manure and sheep's manure and all types of ingredients that are added to that. So even if it's like a 1 or 2 year cycle, to be able to recycle all our soil, make our own compost. Sorry about that sound that my computer is doing.
That's all good. They might be able to edit it out, hopefully.
Sure. And then I was going to say one of the other things is this year we were going to plant 10 to 15 acres of alfalfa. We ended up missing the kind of window for it. We might still plant some late, but next year our goal was to plant a whole bunch of alfalfa. The companion plants that are recommended for that are oats, peas, and barley. So we're going to plant a whole bunch of that, let it seed, and then hopefully, harvest it, have it growing natural, seed it again the next year. And then the goal would be to add the alfalfa meal to, our organic inputs in the spring, use a lot of it for composting, mulching, and, having animal feed in the future for ourselves to share with neighbors and things like that.
Sounds pretty dreamy, honestly. Like I feel like it's just so important to be doing these things right now at this time in the world. You know what I mean? Like it's just imperative, really, to be working with nature and in cooperatives rather than, dominators.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm really excited about it. This year, we missed the window to plant when we wanted just because there's too many other things
Yeah.
happening. So, we're often limited by resources and, the help that we have. It's also hard staffing here in the northeast of Vermont.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that's the goal, is to do all this cool stuff on our own. And for
Mm.
everything that I want to accomplish permaculture wise, like, creating our own alfalfa for multi-purpose, or having all this food being produced in the future,
Yep.
it's like I can create an opportunity for someone else. We all get to eat from it, and that's kind of what I hope to develop the property into.
Right on. And so you mentioned tourism. Is there a legal framework for that, or does it matter?
Yeah, we can. I mean, we can't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to sell people weed on the property or anything like
Right.
that. I technically can grow a certain amount of plants for each residence.
Yeah.
So, everyone in Vermont can grow 3 or 4 plants or something. You could grow a bunch of weed. You could share that with people if you wanted. But
Right.
that'll eventually change, and
Yeah.
I hope one day to have direct-to-consumer markets available where we could just have a little store on the farm.
Hmm.
That's kind of the vision, is picture like you come into a lodge, like you're checking into a little resort, and
Hmm.
it's got like a little shop in the back that's got, some, merch and apparel, like head shop. You can buy
Hmm.
our weed. Maybe there's a refrigerator with some like Caesar salads and turkey sandwiches and cold drinks.
Yep.
So you can just kind of go and have a picnic or whatever. There's a couple cabins that are here already, and then we'd like to be able to build more. And I got to figure out how to one day actually put this together and finance it and learn about the hospitality industry. But we'd like to hold events and seminars, and we'd like
Yes.
to do rebel grown style events where people could come and sample a new variety, be involved in maybe our phenotype selections, tour the year's breeding projects, things like that.
Yeah. Sounds like the dream. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Any final words or milestones? Anything that's coming up, like quickly this summer?
Yeah, I don't want to, promote too much. Thanks for the opportunity to kind of share a little of my story and talk with you for a bit. Um, and, my hope is to continue to find partnerships that want to support bringing my genetics to people, in terms of, producers and markets who believe in the brand and what I'm working on. And then also home growers can always access my genetics as well through my website. So that's always important. And what I really hope to do is have a budget to market more, because rather than paying for marketing to create a perception, I really just want to share what we're actually doing here. In
Yeah.
terms
So
of
how are you
bringing.
doing that? Do you have? I know you're probably on Instagram, but like, how are you communicating with people?
Well, a lot of it is just about the resources and the budget. We have a newsletter that if you sign up on our website, I was keeping up with it, doing it every other Friday, where I could give, here's what's going on the farm in California or
Yeah.
Vermont, or our breeding program. Instagram, I guess, I try to be fairly, present on there and sharing little bits and pieces of what we have going on, but accounts keep getting deleted, so that's always complicated.
Yeah.
Um, and the
I
goal
heard
would be.
Mean Genes got taken down, eh? I heard recently.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm sure he'll get it back. I've had mine taken down. They come back, but it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Sorry,
Um,
the goal you were gonna say?
no, what I was going to say is, like, if I had the right, I guess, budget or resources, I would love to have more regular blog postings, contribute more to Skunk Magazine on their online portal, and have more
Hmm.
regular, just kind of journalism or sharing what we're doing. Have some resources for video content, because I'd really love to show the cannabis world kind of what we have going on in our breeding program. It's unique that we're growing in, amended native soil with compost that was made on the farm from recycled materials from the property. And this year especially, I mean, right now we're sorting through, over 3,000 seed plants of some of my best genetics. Some of these are older seeds going back, 13, 14 years, recreating things, repopulating things. So that's what I'm excited to share with people, is the genetic development. And because most of our stuff is really home growers who know about us by our seeds, and the small market that we participated in California and Vermont, most people haven't necessarily seen our genetics yet.
Hmm. Okay. Well, there's lots of time for that then.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exciting times for sure.
Yeah, it is definitely. Well, let me know when it comes to Canada because I want to get some. I want to homebrew some. It sounds fun.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Dan. It was very nice to chat with you officially.
Awesome.
And, keep me in the loop.
Cool. And seeds, we send seeds to Canada all the time, so I'll
Do you
get you
really?
some seeds. Oh yeah, no
Oh,
problem.
okay. Please do. That would be
Sweet.
great. Awesome. I'll talk to you later.
Yep. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.